Hello, my name is Erica Pereira. I went to Clark Atlanta University in 1995 and 1996. At that time, I was Erica Hines. While at Clark Atlanta, I was a Spanish major. During that time period, I had a wonderful opportunity of studying abroad with Dr. Brown in Guayaquil, Ecuador. When I made that very first study abroad trip, I barely knew any Spanish. I really didn't know much at all. At first, it was pretty terrifying, but once I got with my host family, they ended up being the most loving, caring people I'd ever met. And they helped me along with my Spanish as well as the Spanish courses that I was taking there. So we were in Guayaquil, I think, for about 6 weeks, if I'm correct. It was an absolute life-changing experience. That was in 1996, and I'm actually still in contact with that host family. We actually talk quite often. It's my hope one day to go back there and visit them now that I can fully express myself, because back then I was just really struggling with the language. But that trip ignited something in me where, like, I literally did not want to graduate from college because I just wanted to keep studying abroad. And I was like, if I graduate, then I'm not going to be able to do this. So let me just stay in school. So even though I ended up transferring to a different university, I continued to study abroad. And I went to Costa Rica, um, the Dominican Republic, Cuba. Eventually, once I became fluent in Spanish, um, I figured that if I could learn Spanish, then moving on to a third language I could do as well. So then I went to France and I studied abroad there to learn how to speak French. Initially, I majored I became a Spanish major to become an interpreter. And I did that for a while. I worked in interpreting and translating for a while. But once I started a family, the schedule didn't quite fit into what I needed. So I actually started teaching Spanish with Atlanta Public Schools, and I became a high school Spanish teacher. As a high school Spanish teacher, I took the same principles that I learned at Clark, and I've applied them to my students. So I now have my own study abroad program for my own students. Every year for 2 weeks, we travel abroad and my students learn Spanish. We use the same setup. We live with host families. Typically, I put 2 students per family because they're teenagers. They're still kind of young. Usually they're between 14 and 18. Um, their host families don't speak any English, so they are forced to learn Spanish. Full immersion is always the best way to learn a language. With their host families, they're able to practice the Spanish that they're learning in their morning Spanish classes. So they're usually in small group classes with a teacher from that country. And they get a chance to use it with their host families as well as in the afternoon when they're volunteering for community service. So those community service hours that they get abroad apply to their community service requirement here to graduate high school. I've been doing this program since 2012. In that time, I try and take my students to a different country each year. So during that time period, we've been to, our very first trip was in Panama. Then we went to Nicaragua, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Mexico, Colombia. In 2019, we went to Spain. During that trip, we were able to we had a long layover in Munich, Germany. And then while we were in Spain, we had a day trip to Morocco. So in that time period, I have been able to graduate students having been to either 4 to 6 countries with me before they get out of high school. So this is life-changing. The students who travel with me tend to travel abroad in college as well. They'll usually contact me and say, hey, I have students who've gone to Uganda that have as biology majors to study medicine in South Africa and Japan. Like my students really, since they had the experience young in high school, it's not so scary to them. And they're willing to go wherever from there, no matter what their major is. I don't think any of them have been Spanish majors, but whatever they're majoring in, engineering, biology, pre-med, they're able to apply the traveling and the study abroad to how that most enhances their new career path. In my personal life, studying abroad has opened the doors to a whole new world of friends. Once I started a family, I decided to teach my children Spanish. because I had to work so hard at it, I did not want them to have to work as hard as I did. So my husband and I started using the one parent, one language method with children, where he speaks to them only in English and I speak to them only in Spanish to help separate the language and help build the vocabulary in both languages for the children. So my children are fluent in Spanish. They're also biliterate and bilingual, so they can read and write it. My oldest son just graduated high school with a Georgia Seal of Biliteracy, which is something that the state of Georgia does. So, for their graduates, they have them take very intense tests in the target language. And if they pass the test, then they get an additional seal of biliteracy on their diploma, which is a big deal. I think only 61 children or graduates were awarded that in this 2022 graduating class. Study abroad has been amazing. It's now a part of my life. It's what I do all the time. I absolutely love it. My students love it. It has enhanced my life and so many other people's lives in so many ways. And it's bigger than just speaking a language. At this point, there's not a career path in the world that has not been globalized. Whatever you learn in a college, in a university, you have to know how to apply that in many different languages and many different cultures and many different surroundings. So this is something that's so vital for every single major that it has to be pushed and it has to be made as easy as possible for the students to be able to participate in it. And I thank you for your time. It's been wonderful, and thank you for the opportunity.